All right, thank you very much, everybody, for coming to this month's event, RocGrowth Candids. My name is Alex Zapisochny. And as all of you probably know who ended up showing up here today, about 2 months ago, we had Vice President Joe Biden, along with Governor Cuomo and various other people. They descended to Rochester, and they officially announced the launching of the American Institute for Manufacturing Integrated Photonics, AIM Photonics for short. This is a very unique public-private partnership to which approximately $600 million has been dedicated. That also includes $110 million from the Department of Defense, about $250 million from New York State. And the purpose of this venture, AIM Photonics, is really to serve as a truly national hub that will enable the United States to keep and to grow its very unique position as a leader in fabrication of innovative optical devices. As we're going to hear about today in more detail, photonics is a very broad field, and in particular it enables a lot of advancements in so many other fields, whether it's big data or the life sciences, obviously the defense is another one, telecommunications, and many, many others. So this is something that's going to impact Rochester on many levels. And today, we're joined by two individuals that were truly central in positioning Rochester to win this big national, very fierce competition to get this institute to Rochester. And I'll tell you a little bit about each of them. Jay Eastman, Jay, that's sitting right there. I think no relation to George Eastman, is it? No?
Actually, there is.
Is there really?
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
There's
no questions prepared. Well, Jay Eastman, in addition to being a relative of the famous George, he is a serial entrepreneur in his own right who is now on his 4th startup company. 3 of those have been centered around photonics technologies and products. He holds bachelor's and a Ph.D. from the University of Rochester, and specifically its Institute of Optics. He is a named inventor of 47 issued U.S. patents and many other international and patent pending. Very accomplished in that area. And he's also served on the boards of 8 public and private companies. And Paul Ballentine, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Emerging and Innovative Sciences at the University of Rochester. This is an organization that we'll certainly hear more about today. The company that I'm from, iCardiac, has actually been a happy partner with CIS. It's a great community organization that's really helps entrepreneurs in this area. It focuses on technology transfer and the development of industry and university collaborations. And Paul also has a Ph.D. from the University of Rochester, and prior to returning to Rochester, he lived and worked for about 20 years in Austin, Texas, in the fields of semiconductors and the clean energy industries. So thank you both for coming here today, and maybe we start off really basically, because I spoke to some of the people right before, and briefly, Jay, what is photonics for those who may not be aware?
I'll give you 2 definitions. One is of optics. Optics is the science and technology of light and the way it interacts with matter. Photonics is really, I think, more focused on devices. So, for example, a photonic device could be a small sensor, could be an LED, could be a photonic device. Those are 2 very simple types of photonic devices. More complicated ones are used in communication of data across the internet. Lasers, modulators, all kinds of things like that.
And Paul, tell us a little bit about AIM Photonics. What is it at this point, and what are the basic timelines around when we should expect to actually see some activity?
AIM Photonics is one of the U.S.'s national networks for manufacturing innovation. This is a program that was set up by the Obama administration to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. And there's these institutes that are being set up around the country for different things: advanced lightweight metals, additive manufacturing, power electronics. This one, after Jay and I and others had lobbied for 3 years now to get the government to fund one for photonics, this particular one is for integrated photonics, which maybe we could talk about later. And obviously, it's not only were we successful in getting the government to set up a photonics institute, but in drawing it to Rochester, where we are strong. So it's a private-public partnership. It's a research institute similar to maybe what Semitech is for the semiconductor industry. There's many other examples. It's funded by the government, but only for a period of 5 years. And after that, it's expected to be self-sustaining, perhaps with the addition of some on a contract-by-contract basis, with the government. But it's really an institute that takes technology from laboratory demonstration up to when it's ready to be manufactured, and then hands it off to companies. So it's all about manufacturing.
So Jay, Paul mentioned a moment ago about some of the history of Rochester. What is the history of Rochester, and what are the current assets that we have in this community that made Rochester getting this particular institute kind of a nice natural fit?
Sure, okay. If you want to think about the history, it goes back to when Bosch & Lomb was founded in 1853, I believe it was. Corning Glass down in Corning, New York was founded in 1854. Kodak was founded, I think, in 1883, and Xerox sometime after that. So we had all these big companies involved in all kinds of optical technologies that were here in town. Kind of the next big step was in 1929. Bosch & Lomb and Eastman Kodak decided we should have a place that taught optics, since they did so much optics. So they founded the Institute of Optics in 1929. One of the first faculty came over just before the 1929 crash. And then RIT has become very strong in imaging due to the Chester Carlson Center for Imaging Sciences. So we have a great wealth of capability here in town in optics and photonics. And I think that history is a major contributor why this institute ended up with a substantial portion of it here in Rochester.
And of course, there are a lot of photonics-based or related companies here today. Could you talk a little bit about how many photonics companies already exist in this area, perhaps some of the ones you've even worked with at CEIS, and which are some of the other groups locally that are part of this national consortium called Photonics?
So we track that pretty accurately at CEIS, looking for partners to work with, and we count about 120 companies that are directly involved in optics, photonics, or imaging. And then there are many other companies that supply these companies. The thing about optics is it requires an extreme amount of precision in aligning the components. And so out of that has grown a precision manufacturing, precision machining industry in Rochester, which is at the top in the country. And so there's hundreds of machine shops that are associated with that. So there's 6 large sort of publicly traded companies: Kodak, Xerox, Bausch & Lomb, Cooper Vision, Carestream, like that. And then there's about 110 smaller companies. Optimax, Mike Mandino, the president of Optimax, is right here. This is the fastest growing small optics company. They've got something like 50 job openings, and they can't afford them because Alexis here, who is the new head of the MCC program for optics, has not graduated them yet.
Just started a month ago.
And I will say parenthetically, so another program to go along with optics and RIT is the Monroe County Community College program that trains technicians to make optics. And this program has been struggling for the past few years in finding enough students that are interested in going into this area and have the high school STEM skills to do that. And Alexis just told me a couple weeks ago that there's been a substantial uptick in interest. And so therefore, Mike, you won't have to wait long, maybe a couple of years, but this is this kind of serendipity that comes together where the AIM Photonics opportunity is creating more successes for the future.
And in talking to some of individuals that were here today, and when I was telling them about this particular panel, that I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate is actually just how broadly applicable really optics and photonics are. And we talked about it as enabling technology a few minutes ago. What are some of the areas that people may not realize where optics and photonics are involved, and could be actually that rare differentiator that allows a company in some other space that maybe never even heard of the word photonics?
Sure,
or optics,
take a
that
crack
it's
at
a
that.
thrive.
I imagine most everybody here has a smartphone. Certainly I suspect everybody has a computer, and I suspect everyone in the room spends time on the internet. Well, go back and think about what the internet was like when we had dial-up. It was agonizingly slow. What happened? All the signals that come to your house, all the data that comes to your house now comes most of the way through a fiber optic. Not only a fiber optics, there's laser diodes that produce the light that goes down those fiber optics. There's multiplexers, there's modulators, there's all kinds of things that are optics that produce something we don't even think about having any involvement of optics, the internet. It wouldn't exist the way we know it today without optics and photonics. Think about minimally invasive surgery. It used to be that if you went in to have I'm trying to think, a gallbladder removed, you were laid up in the hospital for a week or so. Today you can go in, have that taken out, you're back out on the street in the afternoon. Go in the morning, you're out in the afternoon. That's because of very small optical devices that can look internally to guide so that a surgeon can see what they're doing without having to open your entire abdomen. Infrared imaging is very important. Boston bomber in Boston, the one that was caught, he was found underneath a tarp. The way they found it was covering up a boat, and the way they found him, infrared imaging could image right through that tarp and see his body. Medical diagnostics, CareStream is a good example here in town. People don't think about that being optics and photonics, but they measure color of light and the change in color of reagents with specific conditions in body fluids. So there's more things than you can imagine. Think your flat panel display for the guys who watch football on Sunday, Monday, Thursday night, college ball on Saturdays. You're watching it on a flat screen, right? That can't exist without optics and photonics. And your smartphone can't exist. Is that broad enough?
Well, it's quite broad, and one of the things that really stood out to me as we were preparing to have this discussion was something that Jay said, that if you think about the photonics and optics industry itself, plus all the things that it touches, it's essentially a $500 billion market, which is as big as the auto industry.
Yeah, put that in perspective, that's actually bigger than the U.S. auto industry. We think of the auto industry as being this enormous size business, but optics and photonics is actually larger. It's just we don't think about most of the things that involve optics and photonics.
So Paul, for individuals who are entrepreneurial, want to start a company, perhaps have already started companies in some of these other areas, what are the programs that we're aware of? And I realize that this is still early going and many things are being developed for photonics, but what are the things that we believe is going to be available for those individuals to take advantage of photonics and the expertise that it will bring to the community?
Sure. Well, first we'd like to set the stage that there's a lot of resources available for people that want to start businesses, grow businesses around photonics before photonics. So the center that I run, CEIS, we use state money to match any company that wants to collaborate with the faculty in the area of optics and photonics. I mentioned some of the other programs. So there's a number of resources that are available. Now with AIM Photonics, this is a major addition to that. This is a big deal. Of this $600 million, $130 million is going to be spent in Rochester. And there's sort of, you can think of maybe three concentric circles in terms of the way AIM Photonics will impact this community. One is the inner circle is just the money that is spent at the Institute, which is on the order of $130 million. But a lot of that could be for capital equipment that's brought in, and that's been out over 5 years. But you're talking about the people that work there, companies that are direct contractors to that, the construction jobs that will be created. So that's sort of the core activity. The next ring, which is much greater, is the companies that will incubate, grow, or be attracted based on technology that is developed by the Institute. And so that's a broad range of technologies that Jay had touched on, anything that uses integrated photonics. But the broader circle is the things that peripherally will happen, and they very much will happen. So one thing, for example, is there's a lot of notoriety that's come to this community because of that. Well, this is raising all kinds of interest. Venture capitalists are coming. I met a couple weeks ago with the head of the Department of Commerce in China, and she has roots in the area. She said, "This is great. Guys and people in China really are interested in this." So you have all kinds of exciting things that can happen. But perhaps more appropriate to this audience is, in this outer circle, is ideas for technology and products that can be enabled by the photonics devices. So things like imaging systems for drones that do precision agriculture, or the Internet of Things, which has imaging devices that are very low power, very high sensitivity on the edge of the internet, looking to bring that information in. These are technologies, exciting opportunities for young people to kind of develop, and there will be venues hosted by AIM Photonics where people can come in and learn more about that. The Institute is going through its stand-up period right now, and it will be really kicking off on January 1st. So a lot of these people in the infrastructure that will identify the programs and opportunities and be communicated to the public will be kicked off after the first of the year, and that'll provide opportunity for people to come in and get plugged in.
Jay, the other thing that I've heard people talking about is this is an institute with regard to manufacturing, and manufacturing is something that we don't always necessarily associate with having more of in the United States. You mentioned folks from China coming here. Should we actually expect, as a result of this, a lot more optics and photonics related manufacturing in this industry, and what kind of jobs might that open up?
Well, I certainly hope we do. I find it very frustrating when people say, "Oh, you can't bring any business back from China." That drives me crazy, quite frankly, but that's another topic. I think that's what's going to happen here is we will be so far ahead of the rest of the world in integrated photonic devices that we stand a good chance to be at the head of the pack and to maintain manufacturing here. And that would be a really great thing to do in the United States. I think we feel that, oh, we can't compete with the labor costs in China. Well, if that were as big an issue as people talk about it being, the Chinese wouldn't be buying robots to make their factories fully robotic. Think about that. Probably the biggest issue is really cost of capital. Cost of capital here and taxes here versus China. China is very aggressive in promoting business, and they've done the right things to make business grow, and we don't, quite frankly. I think our governor is trying to make a good shot at it, but it's got a long ways to go. You have to turn the state around. I don't know if that answered the question directly.
No, it absolutely did. What do you think will be the effect, Paul, on some of the other institutions we have in our area, whether it's universities or groups like CEIS, now that we have this in photonics here?
Well, the two universities are going to benefit dramatically. RIT has had the country's first semiconductor manufacturing degree program in the country, and that was in the mid-'80s, and that has not been able to really attract the kind of large investments that it should have. But now with this institute, we're seeing the potential for RIT to have a substantially improved photonics manufacturing capability. So RIT's microelectronics program ought to get a big boost from an applications perspective, the RIT's Center for Imaging Sciences. Certainly there will be research faculty at the Institute of Optics that will collaborate with this Institute. So it'll be the more industrial, applied manufacturing area where, students and faculty can access that. So those, just the schools and MCC will have opportunities to grow. Then, of course, you have a trade organization like the Rochester Regional Photonics Cluster, whose members are going to benefit from that. Really, I mean, we expect this to have a broad-based economic benefit. All levels of employment, all kinds of companies.
Excellent. Well, we'd like to actually take some questions also from the audience. Are there people? Well, if they're short, I can just repeat them. Otherwise, I'll come over to you with the microphone. Are there some questions from the audience? I see one. The only tricky part is this camera. There you go.
Hi, my name's Clement Chung. I represent an organization called the Think Like STEM Hub, which is a collaboration between educators in K-12 space, higher ed, informal ed, and also business and industry. And, we have a lot of teachers who are interested in what this potential for the Photonics Cluster, for the Photonics Institute has for their students. And what kinds of skills would you say you would want the K-12s teachers within that arena focus on as we try to develop this workforce for the next generation?
I think two of the most important are physics and math. Optics is considered a branch of physics. Although depending on where you are in it, it can be simply geometry too. But a good, strong physics, science, and math background, I think, is very important. The other thing, if you're going to be an engineer, it's really important you know how to write a sentence that's coherent. So that's important too. Is that sufficient answer? Do you need more?
Well, no, I'm just very interested to hear your perspective and what kind of things. I mean, I'm an engineer myself, not in that arena, but I totally relate to being able to express your ideas. A lot of engineers are a lot of opinions about engineers is that very focused on their work, they're very detail oriented. But my personal perspective is if you can't get the message across about what you're developing, essentially you're worthless to society.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I got interested in optics in high school. I was kind of an astronomy buff, so I was always doing things with telescopes. And I was also on a rifle team, and my dad and I made rifle scopes. And I found some books or something that told me roughly how I needed to arrange the lenses to make a rifle scope. But I realized once we made our first couple that, they were a little fuzzy out at the edge of the field and things like that. And I thought, well, I really probably ought to learn more about this. So between that and a couple other things that happened, I decided when I was in high school that I would apply somewhere to learn optics. There was only one university in the country that taught an undergraduate course in optics, and it was the University of Rochester. So I applied early decision in Rochester and went there. And it's been a great decision because one nice thing about the field of optics is kind of off the beaten path. If you decide you're going into optics, you're probably not in the center of the bell-shaped curve. You're off on one end. And the nice thing about that is it means there's tremendous opportunities for you. This is seen as a small field, it's really quite big. But folks who really understand optics, and also if you understand some electronics and some mechanics and some software and firmware, that's what you really need to be a leader in the field. Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm a former Rochesterian. I grew up here and I'm just coming back. I'm just curious, I've been living in Pittsburgh. Actually, I've done technology startups for the last 25 years, New York, then London, then Pittsburgh. And the interesting thing about Pittsburgh is that they have a lot of development. They went from steel to biomedical and, of course, the computer science. And in the last 5-6 years, they've really accelerated in terms of pulling outside players like Google has about 1,200 people there in their official office, Apple, Intel. Recently, Uber, who you probably heard about, where Uber stole 50 researchers out of San Diego, okay, to work on their automated vehicle program. Just curious, I know it's early days yet, but it has the photonics, have people like Cisco and others, have they started showing interest in terms of establishing a presence here to be associated with the Photonics Institute?
Well, Mike Mandina might be able to answer to this better than I, but I'm pretty sure Google's around town all the time, doing developing projects, getting parts for, I'll call them prototype devices. I think there's some work done on Google Glass here. So yeah, these people are sniffing around Rochester all the time.
We've been talking to Apple, Google, Facebook, Qualcomm about coming to Rochester to do things with the talent that's here. A lot of it is the professional talent that is used to be at Kodak. And the answers earlier were, well, no, we're just happy in hiring your people and moving to California. We really don't care if we have to pay them twice as much because this is where we're at.
Right.
And so now the game has changed. And all of a sudden, people are looking at that saying, geez, this really is an exciting place to be. And the fact that the governor's throwing in $100 million or so is not bad either to kind of incentivize, companies to come. So we are firmly, working. We are definitely working on trying to attract some of these. And there's three things: incubate, grow, and attract. Incubate young people, grow companies like Mike's, attract, not Juju.
I think Jay had said something very, very important, which I think Rochester could be a leader in, especially because of the yellow eye that's going out in terms of manufacturing technology. But certainly IoT as it relates to manufacturing automation, right? And Cisco is making a big push on that with their whole thought computing paradigm. And the only way you can do that kind of computation and transfer is going to have low-priced optical devices.
Right.
So there's a promise, I think, that you two are going to stay a little bit after, because I know there's more questions. We'll just take one more, and then we'll move on to the after portion.
Thank you. My name is Bob Lurz, and I represent the older Rochester professionals. They're here. Actually, what I'm interested in, there's been a lot of stuff, as you've seen, and everybody's seen in the paper, and where will this be, where will that be, which building? And can you folks shed any light on what will be where, and manufacturing, administration, incubation in the photonics area?
Yes.
Would you please?
Now, I think the way things are shaping up is that there will be an administrative headquarters in the Legacy Tower at Ballentine. But that's not really where the action is going to be. The action is going to be where you all are going to want to come in and work with the technologists. And that's going to be in a couple different locations. There's going to be kind of an incubator type capability that's going to be co-located with High Tech Rochester in the Sibley building. And there will be some workforce development activities there. And then there will be some of the more hardware-oriented manufacturing technologies that I think will be located in an Eastman Business Park building. So you're not going to have chemical handling in the Sibley building, those kind of things. So you'll see it in a number of different locations. The other thing is, you mentioned this URI, that stands for the Upstate Revitalization Initiative, which is this competition to win $500 million for the region. And because of the success that we have had with this AIM Photonics and with some of the other initiatives, the regional council has decided to make optics and photonics one of its primary thrusts for that. So if we win this, you're going to be able to apply for, and you're going to see a lot more research, not just in integrated photonics, but in the broader sense of these imaging systems and lasers and optical technologies. So really, this is very exciting because you start with this core of AIM Photonics, and then you build out some of these other technology capabilities, some of which more fully leverage the install base that we have.
Well, I mean, to wrap up, I'm extremely excited. I think this is one of the great, true kind of entrepreneurial developments for Rochester in terms of what it's going to mean long term. As somebody from the life sciences area, for me, I think what I'm super excited about is this idea of what are the enablements that photonics and optics and research in that area is going to be able to do for our business and others. But as I hear this, and I'm particularly struck by the question and answer that happened a few minutes ago about Apple and Google and others now not wanting to necessarily move people out, but coming in themselves. Because when I think about Rochester and what, I mean, one of the few things that's missing, it's a wonderful place, is that people know, for instance, that if you want to do internet company, you go to San Francisco. You want to do movies, you go to Hollywood. You want to do Wall Street, you go to New York. To me, this feels like we have something based on history, kind of our current circumstances, and now this amazing outside validation. When Vice President Joe Biden was here, he said, the future is now. And I think as Rochesterians, as entrepreneurs in Rochester, we're going to be able to stand in any room and say, come here, this is the place to be for all things photonics and optics and all the things that enables in the 21st century.
I think that's a great point, because if nothing else came out of this award other than raising the visibility of optics and photonics, and that Rochester is clearly the hub in the United States of where that ought to be, that's a big deal. I could have put it in Joe Biden's terms, but I'll just call it a big deal.
All right, we'll leave it with Jay Eastman's terms. Relative to George, so it's even better than Joe Biden. George Eastman's relative tells us it's good. But Paul,
A couple other things. So if you want to learn more about AIM Photonics, there is a aimphotonics.com website, so you can go on there and learn something. It really doesn't do justice to what's going on here in Rochester, though. We're still, building that. The other thing is, see me, give me your business card, whatever, and I will direct you to some of the senior people at the university that are running parts of AIM Photonics.
thank you very much, Jay and Paul, for coming here today, but most importantly for being key figures and making sure that AIM Photonics is right here in Rochester. So if everyone can please join me in thanking